It is a big weekend for the BYU football program this weekend, quite literally, might I add, as BYU has a number of offensive linemen making official visits to campus. What does it mean for the BYU football program if they can land guys of this caliber? Well, I'll just put it this way. It's good news if you're a Cougar fan.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The motto is your team every day, and as such, this is your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, let's dive right in on today's show, and today is expected to be the first day of Aaron Dunn's official visit to BYU. Now, who in the world is Aaron Dunn? Some of you might be asking. He is a mammoth human being, offensive lineman prospect from Spanish Fork High School in Spanish Fork, Utah. He is the highest rated offensive lineman in this current recruiting cycle in the state of Utah, rated 92 by 24/7 Sports. His overall composite rating just a shade under that, 91.65. But this is a kid, folks, that if BYU wants an absolute foundation building block piece to essentially replace their current tackle crop with, Aaron Dunn is exactly that. Now, he has got offers coming out the you-know-what from literally every program around the country. You can just go down his list: Arkansas, Florida, Missouri, or it's absolutely incredible. The caliber of offers he's received. He's been offered by Utah. He's been offered by USC, speaking of the Southern California. He has got all of the options available to him. I think it's very important that BYU is getting an official visit from him. Now, he has announced he's going to make at least 5 official visits, and BYU is one of them. They will stretch out over this month and change in May and June before a dead period hits in July. But I think this is a big opportunity for BYU, quite literally, to go and make a very positive impression on this young man. I think they can point to the fact that the last 3 starting left tackles for the BYU football program have all been NFL draft picks. That absolutely is going to be a way that BYU can sell what they can do for Aaron Dunn if he picks BYU. They can play the card that he is close to home. Provo is a 15-minute drive from Spanish Fork. He can go home and have Sunday dinner with his family, whatever the situation might be. He's going to be close to home. The best part about it is this is a program that has now top-tier competition that they're playing every single week. They are part of the power conferences. No longer is this BYU trying to say, hey, we're Power 5 adjacent. We're playing a Power 5 caliber schedule. No, BYU doesn't have to say that anymore. Now it's Power 4, but they can say we are a power program. No longer can Utah and SC and UCLA and Oregon and anybody else who may have interest and you have interest in say that BYU's not on the same level as us. BYU is absolutely on the same footing as these other programs, and that's why I think a guy like Aaron Dunn would be a home run for BYU to land. Now, the other thing is, I mentioned there were offensive linemen, MEN, who are visiting BYU this week. Aaron Dunn obviously would be an impact guy potentially as soon as next season, speaking of 2025. What about an impact for this season? Isaiah Jatta, you might recall we talked about him not that long ago, transfer from Colorado, had played at Snow College before going to Boulder for a season and then re-entering the transfer portal. He has been on an official visit to BYU this week, and he has plans to, I think, make a couple more visits, but the good news is BYU got him on campus. That's half of the battle in this day and age with the transfer portal, folks. I cannot reiterate to you guys how important in the transfer portal era it is to get a young man on your campus and show them around. Yes, you can do Zoom tours, you can do FaceTime, you can do phone calls, you can do all that stuff, but getting guys physically feet on the ground at your university inside Lavelle Edwards Stadium, showing them the locker rooms, the practice facility, all the different things, the university itself, the classrooms, the physical part of that is absolutely critical. And I think Isaiah Jatta, he already has an understanding what BYU is all about. He was recruited heavily by the Cougars when he was coming out of Snow College this time last year. He ultimately got caught up in the hype train and went to Colorado and realized it was not for him. And I think BYU stands fairly decent odds of landing a kid of Isaiah Jatta's caliber. He recently received an offer from USC, and this is a kid from Southern California, if I recall correctly, originally. So that obviously could have some pull for him. But I think that BYU is trying to put their best foot forward with these offensive linemen. The nice part is Isaiah Jatta would have that potential to be an instant impact guy this season. We've talked about it, and you guys have asked me time and time again, what is BYU doing in the transfer portal for BYU football? Well, they've added some offensive linemen. Austin Liausa, originally committed from Southern Utah as a transfer. If Isaiah Jatta comes into the mix, that is the tackle BYU wants to come in and compete with Braden Keim and or Caleb Etienne in training camp coming up in August. So the nice part is right now there's both impact right away and there's impact down the road if these two linemen pick BYU, and both of them, I'm telling you, both of them, big body, big frames. Isaiah Jatta, 6'6", 300 pounds, absolutely an incredible athlete. You watch his tape and you're like, okay, I can see what this kid is, why programs like BYU want him in the program. There's a reason why Colorado and every other program out there wanted him. And then you look at Aaron Dunn, he's just a prototype. They list him at 6'7". I've seen his listed as tall as 6'8", 280, 290 pounds. He is just a specimen of a prospect at left tackle down the road. So I really like the way BYU is approaching this. They're being methodical in their search, identifying guys they believe are instant impact types in the transfer portal, but also at the same time, they are not ignoring the in-state prospect. A couple of you got after me after I did a podcast earlier this week saying that, Jake, you need to focus on the in-state prospects. My comments about BYU expanding their reach to literally go nationwide in recruiting did not in any way mean to impugn that BYU was needed to stop recruiting in state. Your homegrown talent in this state. Aaron Dunn is as close to BYU as you possibly can get, it feels like, outside a guy going maybe to Springville or Timpview or Provo High School. He is as close as they come. You absolutely make Utah a priority if you're BYU in this recruiting process. You always do that. You take the best talent you can get out of this state. The problem is, everybody knows about Utah on the recruiting scene. It is no longer this hidden gem that BYU, Utah, and Utah State can essentially steal guys away and get them to their campus because they want to stay at home, close to home. Every other program, the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, Mountain West, on down the list, they're all recruiting this state. It is as competitive as it comes anymore in recruiting these athletes. So it is important that BYU got Isaiah Jatta on campus this week. It's absolutely huge that Aaron Dunn is going to be on campus this weekend as well for an official visit. Both of those young men can have a major impact for BYU in the really near-term future as soon as a couple of months from now in the case of Jatta. So I appreciate what BYU is doing with this. They are expanding their reach nationwide. They continue. Every day, I'm opening up X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and I'm seeing another offer to another prospect, and I have to look up where they're from. I saw one from La Brea High School down there in Southern California. I've seen ones from Georgia and Texas. BYU is expanding that reach as far and wide as they possibly can, trying to find the best prospects they can possibly get. But I'll tell you what, there is in no way BYU ignoring the state of Utah. They are absolutely doing their best to win the in-state battles. The problem is Utah is already here and obviously recruiting at a fairly high level. And then literally every other top-tier program, they know the caliber of athlete that comes out of the state of Utah these days. We grow them good here in Utah, to use that expression. We've got a very, very solid base of recruits. It may not be the same numbers as some of the higher impact states like Texas, California, Georgia, Florida, where in terms of just the mass bodies of talented athletes that come out of those states, just with their population bases. But relative to population, Utah punches way above its weight in terms of the overall caliber of recruit and also just total number of recruits that get nationwide offers. So yeah, it's a really, really important weekend for BYU. There's a number of important weekends coming up. I will talk about them as they come. Different prospects coming to visit BYU and trying to get a feel for the university. But I think this weekend, quite literally, a huge weekend, because the two dudes I hope BYU can land from this weekend are two huge human beings. So really, really cool to see that. And we'll ultimately wait and see where things land in the end. All right, coming up here in just a minute, let's talk about Jaxson Robinson for a little bit. He's been at the NBA Combine all week long, making headlines, both positive and negative. Here, a BYU fan. We'll dig into all that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, if you're out there this summer going wherever you might be going on summer vacation and you want to go to an event, Game Time's got the option for you. Right now with the NBA playoffs ongoing, if you're looking to go and watch one of these NBA playoff games, well, the best part is Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA. They can help you guys get the tickets to the game that you or games that you would like to go to. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat inside the app, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying your NBA tickets and makes the solution as simple as possible. The best part is, my friends, getting tickets on the Game Time app, prices actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. So take advantage of the opportunity today and work with our friends at Game Time. They want to make sure that you have the best experience possible, even if it's not the NBA playoffs. You're going to a Major League Baseball game this summer. You want to go to a comedy event, a concert, a theater show, whatever it is. They've got the options for you guys. So download the Game Time app today and take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with our friends at Game Time. Create that account on the app. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase, by the way. A special offer from our friends at Game Time. Once again, terms apply. Create that account on the Game Time app and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Lowest prices. The best tickets in the world, my friends. I just butchered their tagline, but once again, it's our friends over at Game Time. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen to the day. All right, my friends, I know you all out like me all of you guys are probably like me and watching a number of sporting type shows every single day on ESPN or Fox Sports, but the whole embrace the debate culture that these talking heads have to shout over one another, it gets old, and you probably want to turn down your volume on your TV. Well, I want to encourage you guys to make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming going on those other networks. Locked On Sports today bringing you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, Jaxson Robinson out in Chicago for the NBA Combine, and it's a big platform for him to show what he's capable of. The overall impressions based on what I've been reading, and like I said, I'm not in Chicago, so I can't say that I've seen this with my own eyes, but the overall impression I'm getting from his performance in Chicago has been relatively solid. Did he shoot it extremely well? No, but the thing is, Jaxson has shown that he's got the ability, standing a shade under 6'5" with nearly a 7-foot wingspan. He's got the size and the measurables to be a wing player in the NBA. The bigger thing I thought for Jaxson Robinson in terms of going out to the NBA Combine this week that he needed to go out and do was to just get in front of NBA scouts, executives, and the like, and get feedback on what his game and where it stands right now in relation to his future in the NBA. Yes, he is a 4-year college player, but he's still only 21 years old. He has another year of eligibility, and that's kind of the big question mark right now. Is he originally announced he's entering the NCAA, and he was originally entering the NBA draft, and then a day or two later officially announced he was putting his name in the NCAA transfer portal, so keeping his options all open. Well, the Deseret News, Sarah Todd, who is in Chicago covering the NBA Combine, she's obviously the Utah Jazz beat writer, but she says this: there isn't anyone that believes any schools other than Kentucky and BYU have a shot at landing Robinson if he decides to remove his name from the NBA draft, but it does seem to be a consensus about what will happen if he chooses to return to the college ranks. It says this: multiple sources close to the situation told the Deseret News that if Robinson decides to withdraw from the draft, they fully expect him to be playing for Kentucky next season. Now, a couple of you pointed out that Mark Pope made the trek to Chicago to watch the Combine, meet up with Jaxson Robinson, and Jaxson was effusive in his praise for Coach Pope. Here's the deal. Jaxson Robinson was lost. And what I mean lost is he was not having the college experience he had originally anticipated, having gone to Texas A&M and Arkansas. He had played sparingly, just kind of a disjointed role at both programs he was at. And Mark Pope brought him to BYU and essentially told him, this is what we have in mind for you. This is what you're going to become for us. And it's worked out, I think. Everything that Mark Pope probably ever promised Jaxson Robinson has worked out. He is the reigning 6th man of the year in the Big 12 Conference, and a lot of that goes to the fact that Mark Pope brought him to BYU, sold him on the vision he had for him, and it worked out that way. I've got no problem saying that Jaxson Robinson, absolutely, if he removes his name from the NBA draft, he's going to probably go to Kentucky. I will say that right now. I know that might make you upset as a Cougar fan, but any of you who are longtime listeners, everydayers, I like to call you guys the everydayers, and you guys are the diehard of the diehards of fans of this podcast. You guys know that I've been saying since January that the anticipation was that Jaxson Robinson would not be at BYU next season, whether that was going to the NBA draft or transferring and cashing in on NIL, whatever it was. BYU was not going to be in the cards for him come next season. There is still that opportunity potentially for him to return to BYU. Let me be very clear about that. That still exists out there. And Kevin Young, he's been waving a magic wand seemingly since he was hired at BYU and pulling proverbial rabbits out of his hat every single day. Maybe today's the day we hear about coaching hires. I don't know when that announcement is going to come. So before you ask that question to me, I don't know. I have been waiting for it quite literally all week long. I've been waiting for 2 weeks now for Kevin Young to announce another hire or two for his assistant coaching staff. I've been told he is close. I've been told he's close to getting it done. Take that for what it's worth. I've given up on trying to prognosticate when it's going to happen. And by the time this podcast comes out, maybe the announcements are out. Maybe you've already heard about it, and then you're watching this podcast. And hey, great news if so. I don't know why they're announcing it on Friday, because that's the end of the work week, and that really kind of loses your place in the news cycle. But irregardless, it's one of those things. I think that Jaxson Robinson, BYU is not the end goal for him after the season. I think he accomplished everything that he set out to accomplish in a BYU uniform, and I applaud him for it. I thank him for coming to BYU, taking a chance on coming clear across the country and showing what he's capable of. This kid from Oklahoma, he'd probably never even heard of BYU before Mark Pope showed up. And the other thing about this, Mark Pope, he goes everywhere, folks. There's a famous story. I think Robbie McCombs told it, that he was the only college coach to make a trek all the way to Madagascar to recruit guys at a basketball tournament. That's, I don't know how many hours of travel to get to Madagascar it is. Our good friend Jeff Hansen would know, because Jeff, if I recall correctly, served an LDS mission in Madagascar. It's got to take 24 plus hours all told, probably, to get there. But Mark Pope goes everywhere and anywhere he feels like he can get an edge. And Jaxson Robinson, having him show up in Chicago, according to some of the stories I read, it absolutely made an impression on Jaxson. So don't get too upset if Jaxson Robinson, if he does decide to withdraw his name from the NBA draft, that he is going to go about going to Kentucky. That shouldn't surprise you. I will still say my money is on him staying in the NBA draft, though. I believe that he is going to pursue his NBA fortunes. Even as a second-round pick, I think that he is content to go potentially the G League route, develop his game, get paid for it, and be able to focus full-time on basketball. I've said it often on this podcast as well, that at points in guys' careers, especially when it comes to being student athletes at the collegiate level, doing school and doing the sport that you love, it becomes a drag because it's 2 full-time jobs. Any of you who have gone to college, and I'm guessing the vast majority of you have done this, it's a full-time job in and of itself. Imagine adding a Division I sport on top of it. It's a whole nother full-time job, and you got to be able to balance the two. It's really, really tough to do, and it gets old after a while. So that's why I believe Jaxson Robinson, I don't have any inside intel on this. This is me speaking from the outside. I believe he's going to stay in the NBA draft and be content to collect a paycheck and develop his game at the professional level, even if it means going the G League route. Yes, he could cash in and make a hefty penny in NIL this year, but you still have to go to class. You still got to be in college. You still got to do all the things that a student athlete has to do. So don't be surprised if Jaxson Robinson removes his name from the NBA draft, which I believe he's going to stay in the draft. I'm calling that shot right now. And if I'm wrong about that, once again, I will be happy to eat crow. I think some people find it funny that I make these declarations, but I don't mind backtracking and admitting I was wrong. But I think he's going to stay in the NBA draft first off. That is my prediction, is he stays in the draft, and no matter where he goes, that is what it is. Number 2, if he does withdraw from the draft, yes, the reporting here from the Deseret News, I'm very confident they're right, that he would go to Kentucky, suit up for Mark Pope for another season, cash in on NIL, and hopefully improve his draft stock enough to improve his positioning in next year's draft, which also the other thing about the draft is next year's draft is expected to be considerably deeper in terms of the overall talent than this year's draft. That's also what you got to weigh if you're Jaxson Robinson. You go back, star for Kentucky. Does that get you anywhere closer to the first round or where you want to be drafted at next year in a deeper class of athletes? Maybe not. That's why you may take that gamble this year. So we'll see what happens. But once again, I've got it in my Locked On Cougars Insider group chat that we've been going. All of you asking, when's the coaching stuff going to be announced, Jake? I give up, folks. I really don't have a good answer for you. And that's the thing about this is we'll see what happens. Now, Mark asked a very interesting question. I'll address this real quick. I want to reiterate a recent question about when basketball workouts start or if they have started with just the 8 guys on the current roster. The thing about the basketball guys is they can all work out at any time that they want together as teammates. So I would assume that those 8, if they're in town in Provo, Mark, they're absolutely working out. Now, getting a full complement of 13 scholarship players plus maybe a handful of walk-ons, that's a different dynamic because 8 guys versus 13, 15, 17 guys, well, it's different dynamic of how you go about practice, how many side you can play. So they are going to be working out. It's a little different than BYU football where they have started organized team workouts for the summer months. That started earlier this week. It's been kind of rolling throughout this week, and they'll be doing that with the strength and conditioning staff. And I'm sure that the strength and conditioning staff with the BYU basketball guys will be taking care of them as well as much as they can just within the NCAA guidelines and rules, but they are working out. Now, is it formal team workouts? That hasn't happened quite yet, but that'll be coming soon because the NCAA has relaxed that. There are opportunities during the summer months for basketball staffs to get together with the staffs to get together with their athletes and work out on a limited basis. So, yes. Maybe we get an announcement on a coach today or coaches today. Maybe we get an announcement on transfer portal additions, whatever it might be. BYU's continuing to do work. I can assure you of that. There's no complacency. Kevin Young isn't kicking his feet up yet. He is just getting after it, and he wants to fill out this roster. I think there's some people out there saying that, well, does BYU realize that they have to fill out 5 more roster slots? Yes, they're aware, folks. Don't impugn their character that way. They know what they're doing. So give them some time. Like I said, I've given up on trying to prognosticate when it's going to happen because my sources keep indicating it's coming soon, and soon is relative. Soon could be 3 weeks from now. Soon could be the second I hit publish on this podcast. It's in the eye of the beholder. So kind of the funny dynamic there. So we'll see. And also one other one real quick. Do I get time here? Let's see. I got time real quick. Nick Chadwick, how do you think an international assistant basketball coach would benefit the program? Getting into the European market in particular and be able to bring in athletes from overseas be huge. It's a big part of the top level basketball programs in the college game. They're bringing in guys from all over the world. BYU's done a very good job tapping in to Africa to bring guys like Fousseyni Traore over. Tiki Aliatiki is a native of Africa. Obviously, Keba Keita from Mali, his fellow countryman, Fous. So Ali Khalifa from Egypt. BYU needs to be more about getting into the Euro-centric side of things. Euro League, I guess, is the best way to say it, and bring some of those players over. You can do that. It's big time, and we'll see what happens. But yes, an international system would be absolutely critical just in terms of the relationships they would have overseas, especially in the European markets overseas as well. All right, so there you go. Some thoughts on Jaxson Robinson and my predictions for what he will do. All right, we'll finish up today's edition of the podcast. A couple more questions from our Locked On Cougars Insider group, a couple of notes as well on the weekend ahead. We'll get to all that as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. All right, FanDuel is here for you guys. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL with their playoffs ongoing. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. You want to run Game 7 between the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves? Well, you got the opportunity to do that with our friends at FanDuel. Jeez, I screwed that one up once again. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets from our friends at FanDuel with any winning $5 bet. Put $5 on that Game 7 and you win. You get $150 to add to your account. And the best part is you can use it on anything. Spreads, money lines, player props, and much, much more, courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. Once again, it's $150 in your pocket with any winning $5 bet, all courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and get started today. Once again, it's all courtesy of FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I want to thank all of you who have signed up for our Locked On Cougars Insider group. Appreciate all of your guys' support. I am a one-man operation over here, so any and all support you guys can offer, hey, I will take it. I cannot thank you guys enough for continuing to do what you guys are doing, and I appreciate all of you for being who you guys are, because truthfully, this doesn't exist without you guys. All right, a couple of questions coming in here from friends of the podcast from Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Danny Drew, my question for you is, why is BYU men's basketball in better shape than the football program in the Big 12? I'm assuming it's currently, Danny. Well, frankly, the BYU basketball program won at a fairly high clip this season, where the football program did not. Remember, this is a BYU football program at one point that was 5-2 on the season. Seemed like it was going to be a matter of getting to a 6th, 7th win on the year, and they went 0-5 down the stretch. There's a lot of angst and just downright bitterness over how things ended for the BYU football program last season in the first year in the Big 12, whereas the BYU basketball program was perceived to be this weakling going into the best basketball conference in the country. They're picked second to last in their debut season, and they go out and they tie the preseason favorite Kansas and finish in 5th place. Just incredible relative to expectations for these two programs. I will say BYU basketball is probably on a more firm footing right now in the Big 12, simply because that there are fewer players in basketball, but each one of them can be more impactful. And BYU had a very, very good season, and they bring back a pretty nice amount of the core that led them to that success last year. That's the thing about this. BYU football, speaking of Kalani Sitake's program, still has a lot to prove. That is why I think you'd say basketball is probably on a better footing right now, but there's no reason to think that can't flip on its head seemingly overnight. If the football program goes out and just goes gangbusters and wins 8 games this season, aren't all of us going to be like, okay, it was a 1-year lull, they're back at it? That would be the perception. Perception is reality. And I know that perceptions can be misconstrued, can be completely messed up, can be completely wrong, frankly, but it is still reality for a lot of people out there. And basketball right now, the perception is they are on a better footing than BYU football. And I would say that that's actually a right perception to have at the moment. All right, a couple other questions here before we wrap up here. Let's see. Brian Jones, please discuss positions that will still need to be filled on the BYU basketball team per the open scholarship positions. Also, like to know which assistant positions still need to be filled. Well, the assistants, there are 3 assistant slots still open. They can have up to 5 assistant coaches on Kevin Young's staff. Now, last year, BYU carried 4 assistants. I did not fill out the 5th chair on that staff. I would expect that Kevin Young will fill out that assistant pool to the max. He will bring in as many assistants as he can. I've been told he's looking at NBA guys and overseas assistant to, like I said, to bring that relationship with European markets over there, and then maybe one other guy to come in and be an X's and O's type. Those are what I'm expecting from BYU and the coaching hires. Now on the basketball, the actual on the court stuff, BYU is still looking for wing players. Jaxson Robinson would have been a welcome return to BYU. Let me be very clear about that. You want a guy like that. Like I said, he's the reigning 6th man of the year in the Big 12 Conference. BYU would love to have him back in Provo. So without him, based on what it looks like, returning to Provo, that means you need to find a wing player. I still believe you need to find an absolute backup for Dallin Hall. You cannot afford to have Dallin Hall just getting run into the ground with the amount of minutes played, because there's no other option to take the load off of him. Yes, I know Dawson Baker is expected to be that, but until he proves he can do that, you still need to have a stopgap in terms of having a backup point guard, a distributor type. That's where Elijah Crawford, who we talked about on yesterday's podcast, who is going to visit BYU this coming Monday, would be a very, very nice get, because I believe he could be absolutely that, at least backstop to Dallin Hall, but he also could offer multiple ball handlers and distributors on the court at the same time alongside Hall as well in lineups as well. Then it still remains BYU needs big men. You got to find some size in the front court. Fousseyni Traore is an absolute bowling ball. It's 250 pounds and 6'5", 6'6", whatever he stands, but the lack of height is what hurts him. Keba Keita stands 6'8", and he's an absolute freak athleticism wise, and he's built like a Mack truck himself, but you still need a legit 7 foot 6'11" rim defender for BYU. I know that sounds crazy to say, but they do need to have some size on the interior. Fouls are absolutely a thing in college basketball. Teams will target guys to get them into foul trouble and force them to the bench. You got to be able to counter that. Right now, BYU is very thin in the front court outside, really, of Fousseyni Traore and Keba Keita. You just don't have the bodies there. So you got to find some beef on the interior. So yeah, at all 3 levels, I guess, is what you're looking at right now. You got to find another point guard. You got to find some wing players, in particular, maybe a 3-and-D type guy like Jaxson Robinson was. And then You got to find some size. You got to find some big men to bolster the interior for BYU. You can't carry just two big men, both of which are undersized, and expect that's going to be good enough for Kevin Young in year one of the Big 12. And I'm not saying that because I know that. I know that Kevin Young knows that, and he will be working to figure that out himself. All right. Geez, I ran out. That show flew by. Absolutely flew by. I want to I'm going to finish on this note. Taylor Dallin, I will always highlight flattery on this podcast. I may be a little bit vain in that regard, but I'm going to say this from Taylor Dallin. Jake, I hope you know how much joy your podcast brings. It's always fun to focus on sports for a bit and forget about the stress of every day. I genuinely appreciate you. Well, Taylor, I genuinely appreciate you, and I cannot thank you enough for that comment. That truthfully made my day for you to say that. And that makes what I do here worth it. I spend a lot of time doing what I do in sports media, and doing this podcast as a side hustle. You talk about doing school and sports as an athlete. I work a full-time job. Most of you know that, doing sports radio on an everyday basis, early morning sports radio, drive time. And yeah, I don't get much sleep because I kind of burn it on both ends doing this podcast in addition to that. But guys, I love it. I've dreamed of doing stuff like this my entire life, and the fact I get to do it, to me, get teary-eyed on this. It's truthfully a dream come true. So Taylor, thank you. That made my day. And comments like that, man, make it all worth it. So yeah, I'm in it for the money too. I'll be very clear. Trust me, I make some decent money for my kids' sports and whatnot off of this podcast, and that's why I continue to do it. But it's really, a lot of it's for the love of it. Podcasting's it's an interesting market out there just with podcasting. Some of you asked, when are you going to go into podcasting full time, Jake? Let's just put it this way: right now, never. But it is truthfully, I love sitting down and knocking out this podcast every day. And Taylor, thank you for that compliment, and just thank you to all of you for the support. It really does mean the world to me that literally thousands of you on a daily basis check this out. So if you don't mind, let's get thousands more watching and or listening to this, and just share it with your family and friends. Tell them, hey, there's this cool show that's out there every day. You can catch it whenever you want. It's on demand. You don't have to be up at a certain time. You don't have to sit down and catch it. You can literally watch it when you're driving in the car. You can do it when you're doing a workout, washing the dishes. The best part is it's supposed to be bite-sized, and I have completely gone over what I try to keep it under 30 minutes, and I routinely blow by that. But share it with your family and friends. Really, you everydayers, the fans of this podcast, I need you guys to help us continue to grow it. It's growing exponentially just in terms of your look at the numbers, especially when it comes to YouTube. But we obviously can still use all the help we can get, because we can get more Cougar fans watching and or consuming this content, and that in turn allows me to do a lot more on my end as well. So thank you, as always, truthfully, for all the support. I cannot thank you guys enough for making this your first listen and or watch a day. And obviously a big thank you once again to all of you who are everydayers, and have a great weekend. And by the way, if a coach gets hired today, tomorrow, they make that announcement, I will sit down and knock out another podcast. We'll call it a sixth one in the week, but we will have it for you guys right here on Locked On Cougars.